Hello and welcome back to Psycholinguistics 101 with Father Andrew. And today we are going to be talking about metafiction and the construction of a current truth about oneself. So, what's the purpose of this lecture is to show how a literary device, specifically metafiction, helps to explain the way people build day-to-day identities. Also demonstrate why an identity can be both false and functionally true, and offer practical questions for self-reflection and for helping others test their current truth. So, what is a metafiction? Metafiction is a self aware fiction that keeps reminding the audience this is just a story. Typical moves of this instrument, literally instrument, is breaking the fourth wall, overt narration, and shifts between author and character. I will demonstrate an example of it based on my website, but its goal, the metafiction's goal, is to force readers to notice how all stories, even the true ones, are constructed. And there is a classical definition by Patricia Vore that says fictional writing which self consciously draws attention to its status as an artifact. Okay, let's move on to the example so that it would be best explained on some work of fiction. And here, the work of fiction is my own personal website. It incorporates AI generated description with some custom logo. It includes the recordings of my voice for the voice creation thing in the Apple accessibility. Basically, anyone could build an AI generated replica of my voice and try to scam banks to get my money. And I'm providing that as an author to be, well, stolen into pieces, basically. But if we are talking about the metafictional elements of it, first of all, um, I would include the AI generated descriptions because it's the impression of me of the large language model system based on my own input and whatever the vibe the language model will get based on that. But website is a literally device then I've integrated basically hovers and color elements to signify whether there is something to move forwards in the branching augmented reality game that my website is. And for example, if you click on this picture, you will be you will go to the next level. Here you will get three additional branches to take. What about forbidden cats? The website gets broken a bit. There is a lecture from Mother ContraPoints, Natalie Wynn. Huge shout out to her. Yes, please take a look at her body of works. There is a recording from my own personal journal. So I'm actively building a narration about myself and visually representing the levels of brokenness. For example, in header here. So the ritual would go to the most broken page, and once you get here, you see that, well, you could return to a different level, get to an article based on my uh, a literature article based on my novella, and you could move to a different level, or you could end up here with some narration in Ukrainian and take a look about my own personal fiction, which has been 2021 in my personal life. And you could know a bit better about myself, listen to a story about these heels, and um, yeah, I think that all of this represents me as a person in a metafictional way because I'm actively constructing a story which might or might not be true. And because of that, I'm creating an image of myself which is to be perceived by a reader as the truth. This is my source of truth, which I built myself, which might not represent me to a T, but which creates a current truth about myself. I could remove everything. I could delete the website, scrap the pages, build new ones, and then the truth would shift. And this is how metafiction works. It first of all keeps reminding the audience that this is just a story, because it is just a story about me, created by myself. This would go somewhere here. There is my signature below the page, which in my own view makes every page a document. But as you saw, I was breaking the fourth wall with the header element, a word narration, literally narrating the pages, which add additional details to the metafictional story, and shifts between author and character because I am my own author and the character in this website. Okay, let's move on. Identity as personal metafiction. We curate a narrative self, the same way an author edits a manuscript. I could have shown you the versions of my own manuscripts, and you would see fewer pages, some would be more broken, but based on the new information that I gained or the feedback that I've received, either from myself or from the others, I've edited the website to the current state, which will be further edited based on new information, new feedback. And this is how identity is being rewritten every passing day. The resultant story may not be factually accurate, yet it still works because we and our audience agree to treat it as real. The reader of this page has no other option as to treat it as my own personal banner, ad space, or my own fictional story, but still treated as real. In effect, each of us is both an author and a protagonist. There has been a lot of talks about main character syndrome, and this is a disbalance in terms of thinking. It's a disbalance of self-relevance in the world. And we won't be really delving into pathology in this video. We will be delving into them at later lectures, but let's talk about the false self / true self lens. So based on the works of Winnicott, true self is a spontaneous and authentic experience, meaning that whenever something happens to us, even if it's just a word, a thought, everything, what hasn't yet been filtered by the mind itself is an authentic experience. And false self is a protective mask, the polite facade that we wear to be better, easier, understood by others. Because I'm wearing this polite facade, wearing this color, playing with my fan, just to relate, first of all, to relate message about myself, but also to be more relatable to the potential audiences that I might have. For example, queer audiences. That's why I have fan here to represent my queerness. And I'm not, I don't know, presenting typically masculine behavior, although I am, or I might not. And this constant shift between false self, true self, authentic, and metafictional. This is I wouldn't say the struggle, I would say the constant shift that happens between authenticity and falsehood. Okay, so a current truth, quote unquote, can live entirely in the false self, yet guide behavior as if it was genuine. So we've covered in the previous lecture that there might be um, many people that consume AI slop in terms of news, in terms of opinions, on a daily basis, and because of that, they construct false self and false view and false worldview, which is based on fiction entirely or not entirely, then that would be metafictional. Um, but they treat it as true, and because of that, this becomes their current truth. This becomes their lived experience. Unfortunately, authentic for them, but for those who can see and for those who can understand, it's still a false view. Okay, let's move forward to the performative identity according to Butler. So identity isn't a fixed essence, it's an act repeated until it feels natural. So it took me years to become confident in my own identity as a queer gay man, just because I choose to represent my identity as this, whatever this is, with tattoos, with, I don't know, with a fan, just because it's a slightly hot summer day, and it's an act repeated until it feels natural, because it brought me discomfort being perceived as queer in the eyes of the person who I've never met, who might perceive me as queer. And this potential perceiveness, perceive, whatever the words I might create, this brought me discomfort, but each performance rewrites the script of who we are, and the more we perform this more authentic self, the more natural it becomes. And a current truth is the latest draft of that script, and my current performance of myself is the latest edition of me. Just because my identity constantly shifts based on the experiences that I had prior to the performance, thus the performance itself shifts into more authentic self. And this constant editing, writing, edit and writing, this is what performative identity is about. Let's move forward. What about narrative self-construction? So personal stories, the experiences that we put into words, they stitch together memories, hopes, and social feedback. People favor condensed linear plots, just ignoring messy contradictions, just because, well, there is a saying in Russian and in Ukrainian, probably from Bible, nothing's new under the moon. And the smarter, or at least the more experienced you are, the more typical plots you have witnessed, both in writing and in the world itself. Because Well, however unique we are in our constellation of experience, but we are still people who live in the same world, and thus we have shared plots, shared stories, and because of that, whenever we hear a new story, our brain goes into trying to predict what is coming next. And based on our own experiences, we will be predicting the story of the person on the outside. And as a result of this narrative self construction, an elegant tale is built which is only partially factual but wholly persuasive. So, what we would do, whenever we are trying to put um, personal experience into words, we might skip some details which might be perceived negatively or untrustworthy in the eyes of the listener of a story. We would omit them and build a more coherent narrative structure for the person who's on the receiving end of the story to be perceived as factual and persuasive. Okay, so temporal and challengeable truth. So, identity statements, whatever the performance I'm performing right now, they hold only for now. They can be revised like any text. They might be challenged by the person, by the receiver of this performative act as untrustworthy, and thus, when I would get the feedback, then I might revise my performance to be perceived more trustworthy. So, new evidence, contexts, or relationships, they invite edits because we as humans perform ourselves on a daily basis, and based on that day's feedback, our performance might change on the other day. And healthy identity is tied to the willingness to update the manuscript which we are writing on a daily basis. So, we are living in the postmodern world where news are written by AI and might be slightly edited by humans, and postmodern truth is constructed within discourses, not discovered outside them. So we are already including, not even including biases, but we are operating within the boundaries of biases, and based on that lens, the truth is further um, further broken down into narrative pieces which some would be discarded, some would be kept, and this amalgamation of truth which went through the lens of bias then becomes the discourse itself. And therefore, a personal current truth is one more social construct, powerful yet provisional. So, this current self on Sunday, the 27th of June at 2 p.m. This is my current self. It's constructed. It's being constructed and was constructed. It's it operates within my own personal biases, within the societal biases that I'm living in, and more global biases that live in my brain rent free. But yeah. So the metafictional paradox lies within the triadic relationship between self-awareness, efficacy, and revision readiness. So, first of all, I know I'm presenting a story. I know I'm presenting myself, my own thoughts, uh, coherently put together into a story about metafiction, for example. Its efficacy lies in that the story still shapes my feelings and choices, because in the moment of telling the story, I might start feeling unconfident, or I lose the train of thought, and based on that, I might be losing the narrative structure of my own story, start saying something that doesn't really represent, become less and less confident, and I might stop. But the story still shapes my feelings. Whatever I'm telling right now, whatever the thoughts I'm presenting to the outside world, it still shapes my feelings and choices. So, for example, moving forward, I might revise this lecture based on the feedback I'm getting from myself and from the audience, in case I get any feedback. I might be better prepared for another lecture on metafiction. So this is just a version 1.0. Well, 1.1, because I already presented a story in Ukrainian. So, and I can rewrite when the plot no longer serves. So if I think that this lecture's shit and that I did a bad job at explaining what metafiction is for my English speaking friends, then I will just scrap the story, be better prepared, and try to explain it once again. And that would be my metafictional journey. I'm self aware that I'm presenting a story. I'm self aware that I'm living my ultimate fantasy as a professor or whatever, the lecturer on the psycholinguistics. I am confident that this is the truth, although this truth lies within the boundaries, within the confinement of my own biases and my own knowledge and my own experiences. But metafictional beauty is the ability to consciously rewrite the story for it to serve a better purpose, whether for myself or for the others. Cool. So, practical implications of understanding metafiction. First of all, it's for therapy and coaching, because treating identity claims as what? As narrative drafts, yes. And it invites clients to author new versions. So whenever the therapy session would be, uh, whenever there would be a therapy session based on the understanding of metafiction, I or other psychotherapists might suggest for the person to to critically assess their own version of events and invite them to rewrite this version for them to suit a better purpose. For leadership and branding, organization craft current truths that galvanize culture yet must stay open to revision. I mean, we saw many a time how companies rewrite their own goals, their own abstract visions of themselves to suit current needs, and the world shifts into right wing, whatever. Um, ah, I'm losing my thoughts. I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. Huh. Let's talk about social media hygiene, because it is important to recognize that everyone is trying to curate their own persona, everyone is trying to tell their version of the story, and we need to assess it critically. Um, and once we do that, our brain starts feeling better, because we do not treat everyone else's truth and us as not, and our own version of the truth is as valid as others, because we are equal in our uniqueness with others. Although some people might be quote unquote bad, some people might be quote unquote good, but we are all still people at the end of the day. Okay, so we've got at our hands three perspectives. So, psychoanalytic perspective gives us a key question. What defensive purpose does this narrative serves? Value of it is that it reveals unmet needs. Sociological lens presents a question of which audiences validate the story. So, being mindful of your own narrative requires being mindful of the audiences that might validate my version of the truth. And it maps power dynamics in society, in the world. And philosophical version is that is truth best seen as correspondence or coherence? So whether it corresponds to others' version of others' beliefs or simply being coherent within themselves is the truth. And what it does, it tests moral grounding. Okay, the practical implications of understanding metafiction is first of all to give your story a title. I've chosen myself, like this is my personal journal, and it has the title of it, The Diary of a Woken Heart by Andrew Emmond, because that's how I feel my story and my identity as a person living in this world is. I summarized the identity claim in one sentence, and this is just a diary of a woken heart. Of a heart awoken. And I might rewrite the title when this one no longer serves my purposes, or I might keep it up to the end of my days on this earth. But what would be the second step in this self-audit would be to list the scenes supporting it. So which audiences are relevant to us? For me, it's the queer audience. For me, it's women. For me, it's those who delve into psychology, psychiatry, psycholinguistics, or just people who try to understand the world. Huge audience I've just described, and I hope that my message relates to them. And hope is the best we can do in it. Ask who benefits from this version. Currently, from this version, I benefit because I feel more confident in my identity as a queer gay man, as a scholar, potentially and factually. So, if the narrative that you are hearing benefits others, and you are not in that group of others, then you should be a bit more, what's the word? A bit more wary of the story that is being constructed. Let's call it against you. If you are not in the group who benefits, then you are in the group whose the story is not serving and thus is against you. Okay, draft an alternate ending that feels more authentic. So, if the story that you are currently living, for example, if you are stuck in toxic relationships and you understand it, you gave a title to the story, you list the group that this is relevant to, and you understood who benefits from it. So, typically in toxic relationships, the other party benefits from this story. Then your next step would be to draft an alternate ending that feels more authentic to you. What would that be? Oh, I should end these relationships in which I'm suffering. So I would like to see myself, first of all, not suffering, second of all, happy. And what does happiness mean to me at the moment? Happiness for me at the moment feels being free from the toxicity. And Based on the performative theory of Judith Butler, you should rehearse this narrative in small and safe contexts. For example, share it with your friends. The next time you see them, and they ask you, how are you? You say that, I've been thinking about ending these relationships. And what would their response be? Girl, we already told you like hundreds of times to leave them or them. Um, and by rehearsing this narrative, you become more confident in it, and thus it gives you power to actually achieve it. Okay, discussion prompts. So write your thoughts down in the comments below, or just think about them. That's more than enough. So when does a protective story become self-sabotage? As the mother RuPaul always says about inner saboteur, that your psyche might be creating a narrative to protect you from negative feelings, but in the process of creating a protective story, it sabotages your own drive for happiness. That's my view. That's RuPaul's view. And what's your view? I'm curious to know. And can shared identities, for example, national myths, survive perpetual revision? Me being a Ukrainian and being under the invasion of Russians, we have our own national myth of Cossacks, for example, which Russians took and tried to create their own national identity, not even identity, national myth about Ukrainians being the smaller brother of Russians, and they create this national myth that propagates through the official channels. Can it survive the perpetual revision? Our own identity as Ukrainians is grounded deeply in historical context, not in the metafictional rewriting of it. But I would like to hear your thoughts on your own national myths. And where's the line between authentic transparency and narrative oversharing? So, have I overshared during this lecture about my own views, or was it an act of being authentic? I don't know. I'll think about it and maybe come to a different conclusion than the one I have currently. Okay, and key takeaways. Let's wrap this up. So, every self description is a work of metafiction. It's crafted, it's provisional, and it's effective. It's effective in a way that brings coherence, it's provisional in terms of providing positive self feeling, and it's crafted because it includes and omits some parts of authentic experience. So, owning the author role enables conscious revisions, and it's important for achieving a more authentic self. And real growth lies in balancing narrative coherence with factual integrity, meaning that it's better not to skip parts entirely, but to build a coherence which relates to the true self. Okay, this is the end of the lecture. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, follow, and subscribe. And yeah, thank you for diving on this journey into metafiction with me. It was a pleasure. And Father Andrew's out. XOXO.